I'm live. I think I can. I think I'm live. But if you all can hear me, please just give me, uh, give me a number one in the chat room so I know that I'm good to go. All right. Peace, Sister Manira. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Loud and clear. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Cool. All right. So I know you're expecting. Usually, it's Brother Lowe who's bringing you the movie reviews slash breakdowns slash narratives slash chronicles. But I had a I guess I'll call it a film set, a media set that I wanted to break down for a while now, and I just haven't really gotten into it. And so I decided that it would be better to do it this way on this platform because I'll get it done. Shalom, 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 akoti kashia. But so yeah, I'm gonna get into it. So yeah. Shalom, brother Low. Yeah, So what I'm breaking down is the TV miniseries V. Now, there was a couple that came out, and really, I'm breaking some of it down because there were different V's. Peace Sovereignties, Peace Precious Stepney. You I think I saw Sister Manera earlier, but yeah, there were different ones, Sister Deidre, that came out. There was one that came out. I think it was either 2009 or 2011. One of those. It was a reboot with Morris Chestnut that came out, and I got canceled. It was okay. It wasn't. It was all right. Peace, Mama Sequoia. But there was the original one came out in '83, in 1983, right? And the reason I wanted to get into it, one is because, like, when you really look for information on this particular series, like in terms of like just people talking about it, is there's very little, right? So anytime I'm looking at something and it's like very little information, those are usually the things that I kind of want to share, maybe a little bit more, because maybe maybe I might see some value in it and notice that it's not really being spoken about much or whatever. But most of the time, if you look up V, you'll see maybe the new series, or you'll just see some funny '80s stuff. You know what I mean? Because it's become kind of like a cult classic in a way. But it was actually, it had 40% of the viewer ratings when it came out. Viewer watchings. So when it came out in 1983, it was pretty popular. You know what I mean? It did well. Let me say that it did well enough for them to do a second one, because they did that one, then they did another one in '84, V to Final. So the one in '83, it was originally like 3 hours and change, right? Something like that. And there was a couple of ideas that went with it. Now I'm going to share some notes. I didn't look at it recently, but what happened was when I first wanted to do the breakdown, I took some notes. I didn't realize it. So basically, what happened, maybe a couple hours ago, I pulled out my notepad, my digital notepad, and said, "Yeah, let me just scan my head real quick and write down a couple of notes of some of the things that I want to say." And I have a particular section that I always write, like movie notes or whatever. So when I went to go get a empty page to write the movie notes, I saw that I had actually already written some notes from last year. All right, that I completely forgot about, because like I said, I was going to do the breakdown before. So I'm going to use those notes once I find them. Oh, there we go. Broadcast. Okay. There's a bunch of films that I haven't broken down yet that I have in here. Hunger Games, and well, okay, I did 1984. I did Conan the Barbarian. I did The Never Ending Story. I did Thundar. Okay, so I'm not too bad. But there's a bunch more in here that I was supposed to do that I didn't do. But anyway, Uh, so let's go to V at least, right? And I'm gonna give you some of my I'm gonna give you some of the basics first before we get into the actual flick. And the thing about it is that I'm gonna bring up a couple of media works because it's actually related to a few other films in terms of concept, but even in terms of timing, you gotta realize 1983, like it's all about Star Wars. You know, it's all Star Wars is the thing. E.T. and Tron. You know, like those were the big sci-fi films around that time. So basically, that was the formula, right? So even when you saw me do the breakdown for Conan the Barbarian, the lightsaber and all that, you know, it was supposed to be like, you know, the Jedi's savior stuff, saber. But I won't share all. I got a lot. A lot of these are for me, and plus I wrote them so long ago. It's not going to be that smooth. But either way, the film was or the TV series was done by Kenneth Johnson. Now the thing about it is that originally he had wanted to do basically a different sort of story. I'm trying to find some of my other stuff, but whatever. He wanted to do a different sort of story, right? He based the entire V series, and this is really important because, and I'm going to say this before I say this part. It's cool, you know, like we've for years now have been breaking down science fiction. You know, I mean, for a long time. But I mean, a lot of people who teach, whether online or in person lectures or whatever, obviously The Matrix and Inception are two films that, you know, you can pull so much data from that they're constantly brought up, you know, especially The Matrix. But, you know, these are pretty old movies, you know, we're talking over 20-year-old movies, you know, 20-year plus, as far as The Matrix, right? And then the Inception is an updated, probably beefier version of the Matrix, just without as much of, you know, much of the action and special effects. But nonetheless, it's cool to do the sci-fi breakdowns. You know, it's cool. You know, it gives you something to think about. It kind of allows you to explore some alternative hypotheses other than what's been given to you, and even if you don't have all of the data of said hypothesis, you can just explore certain probabilities and possibilities of maybe, you know, yeah, maybe that could happen, you know, just through your own internal wisdom and reasoning. But it's always valuable when you can take those things that you might see in a sci-fi film or whatever, and you can apply them, you know, now. Like you can make them a little bit more relevant. And what's cool about V is that it didn't start off as a sci-fi adventure. It became that. Um, the director he based it off of a novel that I urge you all to read. You could probably get the audiobook somewhere for nothing, obviously. Um, but it was the name of the novel was It Can't Happen Here, right? Really good novel. It was written in 1935 by Sinclair Lewis, right? And in fact, there were certain plays made off of, you know, I mean, multiple plays that were made off It Can't Happen Here. You could probably find that online, you know, just maybe somebody's version of it as a play. But it's a really good book, and essentially, it it details an experience in America where essentially there's a presidential election, and the presidency is won by an individual who comes in promising to make America great again and to also restore America back to its traditional values, right? And he also promises $5,000 to every American citizen, right? Now I won't go too deep into that because I mean I don't want to spoil it for you, but also because you know I'm not really breaking that one down right now. But essentially, what happens is that he gets elected, and then he creates this fascist fascist regime, and he basically oppresses America. You know, he creates a dictatorship, and the maker of V, he basically pulled. It was everything is based off of that particular novel. It can't happen here, and obviously fascism is a frightening thought, whether it's 1935 or 2021. Like it's always a frightening idea that you'd be in a place one day where you're comfortable and there's some level of complacency to a fault, and then the next day, you're now under martial law and living inside of a police state. So it's a really good flick. I'm sorry, it's a really good book to read, or if you get to watch the play, because you'll see a lot of the relevant ideas that we deal with today. A lot of the concept, even though they're talking about 1935, right? So again, V was based around that. And originally, when Kenneth Johnson did V, he wanted to do almost like a remake, but on film of It Can't Happen Here, and he called it The Stormfront, right? It was actually a book that was worked on called The Stormfront. And what happened was that when he went to the network executives, the TV executives, they were like, because at that time, again, remember, it was, if you ain't Star Wars, we really don't want to hear it, right? So at that time, it was Star Wars, like I said, Star Wars ET Tron, right? So um, there was an uncomfortability with citing a foreign power coming in to take over the U.S., right? Even though, of course, you had like Red Dawn, right, which was another really good movie. I mean, it's unrealistic in terms of like the survival aspects, some of it, but really great idea and to explore. But anyway, so basically, he was like, all right, cool. So actually, from outer space, right? And essentially, this whole oppressive and dictatorship, the regime was based around the Nazi Empire. That's essentially what it was. It was Nazi Germany in outer space, right? So, but I know that may sound like silly and everything, but when you get a chance to get out, you'll see like, especially for 1983, the special effects were like cutting edge. In fact, he was given a $4 million budget to do V, right, which was huge in 1983 for like a for like a 3-hour TV series, $4 million, right? So, even when he did the scale, the mothership, because they came in several motherships, right? He created a 60-foot scaled mothership, right? Just for the demo, just to show the execs. So just even in terms of shopping the idea, they were so sure about it that even in shopping the idea, they put a certain kind of effort into it, right? So you have certain major characters in the flick. There's a Nah, I won't get into that too much. But so you have Donovan, right? Donovan is like probably back then, especially in the '80s. Donovan was the dude who played in Beastmaster. He was the Beastmaster, right? But back then, you always had like you had to have like the blonde or auburn haired, you know, um, Caucasian man who basically was the center hero of everything. And if you had any brothers or sisters, they were obviously ancillary to, the hunk. So Donovan was that dude. He was a warrior, and he was kind of like an unlikely hero. He was actually a news reporter, a cameraman, in fact, and he ended up just kind of falling into the role of a hero. And there's a lot to that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to explain V in a way where I'm not going to take. I know Brother Lowe usually takes you scene by scene, which is cool. I'm not going to take you scene by scene. One, because it's 3 hours, but two, because I really want you to get peace, brother Antonio. I want you to get the concept, and peace is to me. I saw you. I want you to get the concept, and then willfully you'll watch it yourself, right? But I want you to kind of piece some concepts together, right? So, so we have, and again, we have essentially, it begins with Donovan, and he's doing some wartime filming, right? And long story short, there's also contrasting with that. There's an archaeological archaeological dig that's going on at the same time, where they find. I'm just laughing because there's so much in this series, like so many little tricky little things. But they find a skull in like the side of a rock face, right? And it's saying, wow, this is even older than such and such, such and such. And then right around that time, these motherships, these saucer-sized or saucer-shaped ships, they appear in the atmosphere, right? And the ships are about 3 miles in diameter, right? They're about 3 miles. So they're huge, and there's a bunch of them. In fact, they're hovering over every major city and continent in the United States, right? And they're silent. So the military, they go to like attack them, and they're shooting at them, and they're noticing that there's some type of gravitational field around them, because when they're shooting missiles, the missiles kind of veer off target, and then they're detonated, away from the actual ships, right? So obviously, there's some kind of technology going on, right? Um, I won't. I'll get into the characters maybe as we go. I'm just scanning through these notes. Like I said, I wrote these a long time ago, but um, I don't think I need to give you all of them, right? So, so like I said, okay. So one of the first places that they mention, right, aside from San Francisco, when they say, "Oh, we just see a ship coming over the Golden Gate Bridge," they mention Athens, Greece, and you have to pay attention. Like in the beginning of the film, they're giving you a prelude to there's going to be some discussions around or some concepts around originations, right? So one of the things that a news broadcaster says is that a ship appeared over Athens, Greece, and then he says the cradle of our Western civilization. Shalom, Sister Akuya. And then the next ship that appears after that is over Jerusalem. Okay, so pay attention just though to the Athens, Greece, the cradle of our Western civilization. But the archaeological dig that was happening at that time was not in Athens, Greece, right? So you watch it, you'll see, right? But you could probably imagine where they would be finding old bones or the oldest bones at, right? Um, so then what happened, eventually, and I'm gonna try not to really do too much of a like shot call by call, but they call out. They finally speak, right? They do a numerical countdown, but when they do the numerical countdown, you can hear it coming from the ships. It's in every language, right? So as you're listening, you hear it in English, then you hear it in Hebrew, you hear it in Italian, so forth and so on, right? And then they ask for the Secretary General of the UN to approach, take him on the ship, and they want to have a conversation with him. Now, notice, I think it's a critical thing for one who studies to notice that they wanted to speak to the Secretary General of UN, not United States or whatever like that. Sometimes it's good to understand how much power the UN has. I know a lot of times we're told that they're a peacekeeping organization, but perhaps um, one might even surmise that they are the government, the world government, right? But you could just kind of give that some of your own kind of thought, your own research. And of course, you got to go back to when they were the League of Nations, right? But So anyway, right? So he calls him out. He goes onto the ship. My notes are frozen. Nice. He goes onto the ship. So I'm gonna have to just go off the dome until this acts right. He goes onto the ship, and then he comes back off. And when he comes off, he's like, yeah, he's explaining basically how the alien, they're friendly. Their leader's name is John. Now, one of the things I want you to pay attention to is that there's a liberal use in this particular series of biblical names, right? All done purposely, of course, right? But the supreme commander is what the Secretary General calls him. He said their supreme commander, his name is John, right? And he has some things that he wants to share with us. This is when it gets. I mean, it's been important, but this is when it gets extra important. So John comes and he's like, "Yo, I'm not really a supreme commander. You can consider me as more of an admiral, right?" Um, Now, what he basically says when he comes off the ship, he says, um, "I come from a planet that's 4 segments away from with the star that you call Sirius, right?" And he says that I come from a planet that's in current. We're having difficulties. Like my planet's in difficulties, and he says, but he doesn't say why. Like we find out later, right? But he says, my planet is having difficulties. So he says you can help us by manufacturing. There's certain chemicals in that well, he says first he says there's certain chemicals, which is interesting, and then later on he says a chemical, right? So it's clear it's one thing that they're looking for, but the way he first words it is like, um, you can help us by you can help us by manufacturing certain chemicals and compounds that we need on our planet in order to sustain life, right? Oh, you suspicious when the Secretary General came back off the ship? Yeah. Um, if you watched it, then like they did the MK Ultra on him. Basically, I'll just skip ahead. I'm not gonna do a play by play, but yeah, they basically they did a mind control on him when he went on, right? The MK Ultra. So he says that if you can do this for us, we'll trade with you knowledge and science, right? So important. Uh, and he says, not only will we trade knowledge and science, he repeats it again. He says, we'll solve some of the world issues that you have with the knowledge and science that we have. We'll give you wisdom if you manufacture this chemical for us, right? Um, so Robin, who is one of our, like you could say the female counterpart to Donovan, she's a botanist, but she's a biochemist. One of the things she says is, "I'd like to get into like they're watching this on TV, right?" And she says, "I'd like to get into his DNA, right?" So essentially, what happens is they invite people to come onto their ship to basically look around because the ship that he came down on was a shuttle. So he's like, you can get on this shuttle, and we'll take a select few, like they drew a lottery, and of course those people were reporters, for the most part, and we'll bring you up to our ship, and you can look around and because obviously you're curious, we're aliens, right? So Donovan is one of the people who make it onto the ship, right? Now, one of the things I noticed that was interesting, when they went up on the ship, everyone said like they were doing flashes from different people, right? And everyone was like, "Good luck, good luck." It was probably like about 6 or 7 people, different camera flashes who said "good luck." They all said the same phrase, "Good luck." No one said "God bless you," "May God be with you." Normally what they would say in a movie or something like that, almost as if God has now been removed out of the picture, right? So we're just saying good luck. Now that's an important thing. Now, before I go on, I'm going to tell you why that's important. I'm going to tell you like the correlations here. Um, and I'm gonna have to jump around a little bit. So we already jumped to it can't happen here, right? So you know you got to add that as a part of your studies, and I got some of my notes here that I did. Sinclair Lewis, yeah, it's similar to the rise of Adolf Hitler. That's what it can't happen here was supposed to kind of resemble 1930s, right? So the senator who ran um, and he created a platform called the Populist platform. His name was Berzelius Windrip, and they just called him Buzz for short. But anyway, so I gotta jump to something important, right? Um, so you notice like they're coming down, they're promising knowledge and wisdom and education for chemicals. And chemicals essentially, well, especially they're saying that we need to sustain our planet because our planet is depleted, right? Now, I gotta take you here. So if you want to like get a rounded view, this is why V is so cool because you could read or you could have an audiobook or whatever. It can't happen here, and you'll get the Nazi aspect. Even when you look at the symbols that the symbol that they use, the insignia on their uniforms, the insignia it resembles a swastika, right? So all that obviously was done on purpose. So you'd see like, and then they're wearing boots. They wear these like almost knee-high boots all the time. And they made a point to show them, like in the very beginning when John first got off the ship, and someone was like, "Look at his boots," right? So they're letting you see, like right away, oh, these are Nazis. They're just in outer space, but these are Nazis, right? The other, I would say, supporting material that I would utilize to really get a deeper understanding of V would be Prometheus, right? Now, of course, if we're talking about Prometheus, we're talking about aliens, right? Alien, we're talking about Predator. Alien, Predator, Prometheus, they're the same universe. Peace, occultism, they're all the same universe, right? So, and just to give you the premise of Prometheus, if you haven't seen it, but my suggestion would be like, because V is 3 hours, so if you're gonna watch it, you're gonna get into it anyway. Like it's not like it's a 20-minute flick. So if you're gonna do it, right? So if you're really gonna do it, I would say also watch Prometheus, maybe even Alien Covenant. But for now, don't worry about it. Prometheus, V, and I would read the book It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis, right? That like those three right there give you everything for the most part, right? But anyway, so I'm just gonna give you the concept real quick of Prometheus for those of you who haven't seen it or maybe who did see it and was like, what the heck? Because it was one of those kind of movies where it's like, what is this? But to really understand Prometheus, you have to if you saw the Alien or Aliens, franchise, you would understand that Prometheus is a prequel to all those movies. Prometheus is a prequel to Predator, right? Or Predator versus Alien, either one. In fact, I would venture to say, even though Prometheus came out like almost recently, Prometheus is a prelude to V, which came out in 1983, right? I'm explaining why. So, in Prometheus, in the very beginning, you have let's just say a group of aliens, right? We're gonna keep it simple. You have a group of aliens. One of them is left behind on a planet, and this alien drinks a substance which basically kills it. But what happens is that its body then breaks down and decomposes into water, and through that breakdown and the decomposition, it evolves life on that planet. So it's very similar to like the story of Tiamat. If you know, I mean, we're talking about the same thing though, but really understanding the story of Marduk, which I spoke about on that last Sabbat meeting, and how Tiamat is killed, and from the body of Tiamat comes human beings, right? Now, for those of you who watched Dungeons and Dragons back in the days, you remember that the dragon's name, that that was the only creature that Venger was afraid of. The dragon's name was Tiamat. You know, um, and then yeah, it's almost similar to my man from Last Dragon. Dragon, yeah, similar name, but anyway. So it's this concept again of there being some sort of sacrifice, and as a result of that sacrifice, humanity can evolve, can arise from it, right? So I'm giving you the simple of it because we're really still talking about V, right? But I just, sometimes when you can see the correlations, it helps you to get a more rounded picture of what's actually happening. Because as much as we want to root for these directors and these writers, a lot of times they're really just not as creative as we would like them to be. As we think to be. A lot of times, what they're writing, what they're presenting on film, is really coming from a different basis. I mean, there's a reason, like you'll see with V, that eventually through a series of events, like I said, I'm not going to do the play by play, but through a series of events, we see that the aliens are actually reptilian creatures, and they use this composite human skin over their own skin to give themselves the image and the visage of humanoid life forms. But in fact, they're actually reptilian. But one of the things that you keep seeing different scientists are bringing out, and it's subtle. They're like, oh, their DNA is very similar to ours, right? So this takes you back to Prometheus, where you have the idea or you have the concept of these architects, right? And essentially, these architects create humanity through the manipulation of DNA. We'll say that of the manipulation of the DNA of lower life forms. Now, if you understand something about just the stories of the Anakim or the Anunnaki, right? Because V is basically the Nazis meet the Anunnaki, right? You understand that it's a similar kind of concept. Anunnaki meaning the sky people, the people from sky who came to Earth, right? Um, Ki itself. Anytime you see Ki in that, it's Sumerian, but you see Ki. Ki means Earth, right? So Ki when I say Ki, Ki, right? So the Anu or the Anuum, you know, are the people from heaven or the people from the skies or basically extraterrestrials. Okay, so and terrestrial just means Earth, extraterrestrial or off the Earth, right? So uh, when we're looking at that concept, take it back to Prometheus, and essentially through the course of, I won't give you all the spoilers for Prometheus, but through the course of the film, we get a series of humans back on Earth who find what they call a star map, right? Now, these maps and these images of these, we'll say giants, or what appears to be people who are from a different world, um, they've been found in South America. This is not filmed in real life. They've been found in South America, South Africa in particular. South Africa is extremely important when you start talking about aliens and Anunnaki. South Africa is the place, right? But yeah, they've been found in Australia, a bunch of different places, right? So they basically find this map and kind of proof that maybe there is something else out there, right? And they're able to go to this planet that they find out can sustain life to a degree. They land on the planet. I'm just giving it to you, quick and short. And once using the star map, they map out this particular planet. They get to it, and they find that there was intelligent life there. We'll say, right? And long story short, they find one of these architects or one of these giants, and this particular giant is alive. They're able to revive it. It was so much that happened. I'm leaving a lot out, but and that's mainly there's a lot. but I'm trying to stick to this. The whole, there were aliens who came before, helped to create or created mankind as we know it. And when you start looking at movies like Aliens, right, you start to realize that maybe there was a moment of regret, or there was a moment of purge. In order to create things, often we have to destroy things. And when you look at a movie like Predator, let's say, right, you start to realize that the alien predator is not just hunting for sport, but in fact is a purge instrument, to clear off mankind, right? So either we could start again, or maybe, because essentially these are scientists, right? Like, all right, we tried this experiment, we created these humans. Maybe we like them, we don't like them, I don't know, But you get that sense with Prometheus, because there's a scene towards the end. There's an android throughout the entire film who plays probably one of the most important parts. And there's one scene where the android is like asking, like, why was I created? And basically the answer was like, well, because we could. That's why we created you. So then he's like, imagine if you heard that from your maker one day, right? So we get to the end, and we're close to the end. And like I said, they're able to revive the architect. And David is the name of all these biblical names, or Hebraic names. But David is the android, and he's able to speak to the architect, the alien. Like, he's figured out their language, right? And he's like, "Yo, take me with me. Take me. You should come back to Earth. Take me with you. Whoopty whoopty boo." And like the architect is like, yeah, and then just rips his head off. It's like, get the f out of here. Like, he looked at his boss, who was just really old. It's a long story, but he looked at him. He was so old, and he was like, he wanted to learn like how to extend his life forever, and he just was like, it's almost like when you hear me. I guess especially for you, I knew people. You've heard me talk about this. Like, when I get asked stupid questions, and it's like, you came all this way to ask me that? What? It was that kind of thing where he's like, this is why we were killing everybody. This is why we were killing you. So he tries to, and I want to give you the whole story, right? You could watch Prometheus, right? That's the only part you really need, right? Right there. Like, they came face to face with their maker, and their maker was like, eh, right? But watch the film. I just don't want to give it all to you, because it's a cool film. I don't want to mess it up for you, right? So one of the interesting things, again, that we're going to find with V is that once they're discovered not only to be lizards, but what they start doing as soon as this happens, they start to create these false attacks, these false flag reports, where they're like, oh, our ship was attacked today, and there was a conspiracy by a group of scientists to do this to us, to attack us, or to destroy us. So as a result, now we're now working with your government's military to ensure our safety and to ensure order. That's important. Anytime you hear order, most of the time in film, like when you have a group that's trying to establish order, it's usually a Nazi reference. Star Wars was the same thing. You remember the dark side was all about order, bringing order to the universe, and of course they were the stormtroopers and the death troop. They were supposed to be, Nazis essentially. So it's a similar thing. In fact, what's so interesting is that in this flick, there's a scene when the aliens come down to have to do like a little speech after John comes, and there's a high school band, and they're playing the theme to Star Wars. They played like the whole thing, which I thought was really interesting. So, and obviously again, Star Wars we're talking 1983. Star Wars was big, but it's like, they actually played it in this particular flick, right? So I want to bring you not only to the idea of Prometheus, as these peace, brother Chris, as these uh original architects, these, you know, these aliens, right? They were giants too. They were big. But I also want you to go back again to John saying, if you manufacture these chemicals for us, then we'll trade you with knowledge and wisdom. Now, if you've understood, if you've read, you know, any of the Sumerian myths, I mean, and it's a lot. You know what I mean? You got like, if you just look at the tablets, you got over 10,000 tablets in cuneiform. So it's not like, you know, it's it's a lot, right? Not all of them are translated to, but one of the things that you'll find, you know, with the Sumerian tales is that I keep clicking away from my notes. I haven't even been referencing my notes, but keep them up just in case I want to pull from something. Um, One of the things that you'll find is that there's a story about how these people from the sky came and essentially evolved primitive humans through DNA splicing, um, and as a result, and DNA splicing no different than the creation myth in Genesis. You know, with well, who you might call Eve, being taken out of Adam or Adamu. Now, Adamu is an older term. I'll get into that for a second, but her being taken, you know, using the rib bone, right? What is that? Splicing. She was a clone. They made a clone out of probably the marrow in his rib bone, right? Um, but of course, or we could look at it from a more mystical perspective, and you know, but if you just look at it from a scientific perspective, it's like, yeah, okay, that's genetic splicing. Eve was a clone of Adam. All right. Um, Again, I'm just using that terminology, Eve and Adam, because that really wasn't their names, but just because that's what maybe a lot of people may be most familiar with. But so one of the things, you know, that you'll find in those Sumerian tablets is that there is narratives of blood transfusions, and there's also narratives, excuse me, of transplants and what we would interpret to be as splicing, right? So this concept, this idea that okay, maybe there was some some things going on in terms of DNA. The people who the individuals at the time who were created to work for the Anunnaki were considered to be hybrids of them themselves and the primitive man that was already here, right? And these workers who were created, they were created specifically to mine gold, right? So it takes you back again to what John said, you know, in V, like, yeah, we need this, we need you to manufacture this chemical and we'll trade you this. Now, when you read about these accounts of the Nephilim and the fallen ones and whatnot, um, you always read about how they traded technology. You know, at some point, you know, they began to teach different higher forms of technology, right? Um, Now, going on with V, right? And I'm jumping around, like, because I said first I don't want to ruin it for you, but I'm just hitting the points that I think really stand out. Because it comes a point too where like you're getting the science, and then it comes to a point where it's like an action flick too, right? So most of the science in V is probably in the first hour, and then after that, there's sprinkles of it. Like you gotta just listen and you'll catch little things, but they drop a lot. You know, it's a 3 hour, 3 hours and change, but they drop a lot in that first particular hour, right? Now I want you to keep in mind too. I know we're jumping, but the first created, those hominids that were created by the Anunnaki, their first name was Adamu. Adamu. Now, you might be saying, well, it's like Adam of the Bible, but you got to remember, these stories they predate your Bible stories, right? So Adamu, we know, of course, in Hebrew is red, but it can also be earth. Um, you know, but that creation's name was Adamu, right? And one of the things, the way they created the hybrid situation is that they would take the female Anunnaki and mate them with the males, right? That was one form. Now I know when we read about the Nephilim, we read about the sons of Yah, or the sons of the Elohim, coming and seeing that the daughters of men were fair, and then they made children with them and whatnot, and these became the heroes and the men of renown, as they say, right? So anyway, so I'm just showing you the relationship here. Now, over the course of time, we start to see the intentions, like I said, of V, and V stands for visitors, according to the actual segment. And there was a character who saw what was what from the very beginning, right? He was probably the coldest character in the whole series. Well, nah, because Ham came later, um, but he was real cold, and he was this old Jewish man, and his name was Abraham Bernstein, right? And he was a Holocaust survivor, right? And he was just real cold. Like every scene they had with him, like whenever you heard him talk, he was just dropping gems, you know. But like, so he was letting you know, as far as the audience, as far as the watcher, like, oh, these are Nazis, like this something evil's coming, right? And he had his grandson's name was Daniel Bernstein. Now, similar to the Nazi regime, they had kind of like the V's, or the visitors, established a youth movement, right, where you could volunteer and you could be a part of the, almost like the junior guard for the visitors. They even gave them pistols and everything. And what started happening is that some of the youth were turning in their parents if they thought they were dissenters, right? Now, of course, this reminds you, right, Google, this reminds you of Nazi Germany, but it should also remind you of another flick that I broke down a while ago on the TV Yuya channel. But when I broke down 1984 and showed how the children were used to turn their parents in for, like when the one child was looking at our protagonist, and the child was like, "You're a thought criminal." Like they would just come up with things. So you had a similar thing here. Now, Daniel was the one. Now, I'm gonna tell you something interesting about Daniel, the guy who played Daniel. So the role of Julie, who was Donovan's, like I said, counterpart, who was the biochemist, she was originally supposed to be played by Dominique Dunn. Dominique Dunn. Now, you might not know who that is, but again, old school movies. So if you ever watched Poltergeist, right? She was the daughter in Poltergeist, right? And she was in some other stuff too, but she was in Poltergeist, right? And the thing about it is that she was killed during filming of the, not like on the set, but her boyfriend, allegedly, John Sweeney. He changed his name now. His name is now John Moreau, Moreau, something like that. But allegedly, and I say allegedly because they hit a lot of really, they hit stuff in this film that they never really hit on network television, from the Anunnaki piece to the Nazi piece. So it's like, like they say, if you want to make an omelet, you're gonna break some eggs. So sometimes there's things that happen. Sometimes the films you watch are part of a larger ritual, you know, and that's why certain actors or actresses are used. Sometimes certain actors or actresses are always used to play a certain role, or there's a progression. It'll be 3 or 4 different movies, but it's like something's, there's almost a crescendo that's being mounted and came to through the character arcs, even though it's different movies, right? So allegedly, basically they were having an argument. He came by the house, they were having an argument, and he strangled her, or he choked her to death. Well, the guy who plays Daniel was close friends with her, and he was actually at the house when it happened. You know, and she was on the front porch with her boyfriend at that time, and he said that he just heard that they were arguing. He heard a couple of slaps and then like a thud, and then the boyfriend who killed her like went into the bushes on the side of the driveway and was like, call the cops. And then when the cops came, he put his hands up and like confessed, like, I just killed my girlfriend, right? Um, yeah, you know, allegedly. I mean, he knew she was dead, and then he said call the cops and turned himself in. So I guess that's what usually happens when somebody kills somebody. I don't mean to laugh. It's not. It's actually it's sad that that happened, but the story's kind of janky, you know. But like I said, the guy who played Daniel was there. They were friends, and they were going to be in this movie together, right? Of course, he was still in the movie, and he did an excellent job, like at his role, because he really came off like a sleazy kind of guy. Like you could see the complexity of his character, you know, evolved to a degree, in terms of like what kind of character profile or personal profile you would require in order to make someone like that, who would turn their parents in, and things like that, and be pulling guns on neighbors and things like that, because an external force comes in and grants them a bit of power, so I thought that was really interesting to see where he was in the beginning and see where he kind of ended up as a result. I won't share everything because again, check it out. So one of the things, and part of this is because this was the 80s, right? But one of the things that was interesting, and when I say that because it was the 80s, you didn't really have too many melanin rich characters in this particular series, right? You basically had, we'll say, reoccurring. You had three, and two of them got killed, right? So it was really just my man Michael Wright who was left. Now, you may know Michael Wright. Obviously, he was a lot younger in this flick, but you would know him as Eddie Kane in the Five Heartbeats. I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff, but everybody remembers him. Well, not everybody, but obviously a certain community always remembers him in the Five Heartbeats. He was also in The Interpreter. He was in Sugar Hill. He was in a bunch of stuff. But in any event, so he played a character by the name of Elias, right? And his last name was Taylor. His name was Elias Taylor. His father's name was Caleb. Now again, I want you to pay attention to the names. Always pay attention to the names, right? So his father's name was Caleb. His brother who was killed, his name was Ben. So it was Caleb, which you usually don't see a lot of melanin dominant men walking around with a name like Caleb. Now, I do know a melanin dominant young man by the name of Caleb, but it's not a common name, right? So his name was Caleb. Even Elias is not a common name, right? For melanin dominant folk. Ben, sure, but let's look at it. So we're looking at um, Ben Amin, because if we, I'm going to say it in the form that we would say it if we were saying it, properly in Hebrew. But Ben Amin, right? My right hand or my right son, the one on my right, and then we have Caleb, and Caleb is a newer form. It's actually Caleb or Kalev or Caleb, and Caleb or Kalev, it actually means to, um, well, it can be transliterated into being completely invested in something with your all, right? Now, the way we know that is because of the prefix ka or ke, means like um, all of it or all, whole. And then leb means heart, right? So Caleb or lev means heart, right? So that was the father's name. And then Elias is a form of Elijah or Elijah, right? So Elijah means the Elohim is my Yah, or um, if you speak kind of differently, maybe you might say the Elohim is my God, right? Or we could even say it like this: the gods and goddesses are my God or my creator. Now, Elias was the one who survived. He started off as like a petty criminal, even though he didn't have to be. One of the things, and I hope you peeping like all of the subliminals. So he was like having a little back and forth with his brother Ben, who was a doctor, right? A lot of this, it revolves around science. His brother was a doctor, Ben. His father worked at a chemical plant, right? So he's manufacturing chemicals for the V's, and the brother was a doctor. Now I'll get into that in a minute. The brother ends up getting killed, right? And Elias was a petty criminal, right? And he was having a back and forth with Ben at one point, and Ben was like, "Why are you?" He said, "You still playing this Poe broke down Richard Pryor act?" And basically, he's saying like, "Why are you trying to act like you from the hood when you know that you don't have to? Like we're doing well for ourselves." And Elias, again, this is the '80s, so like he's like, "Oh man, go on with all that." That's back then. That was how you talk. But the point is, he's being something. He's living beneath the privilege of his actual design. And that's important. And I want you to understand the importance of it when you look at his name, right? Elias, the Elohim are my Yah, Elohim. Now we say gods and goddesses, but there's no such thing as a goddess. Um, God is male and female, right? So when we say Elohim, we're saying the masculine and feminine components of the Most High are mine. But now Elohim could also be your mother and father, right? So when you say Elohim, it's what you consider to be your God and goddess, right? So it could be grandma, grandpa, it could be my mother, my father, right? But the point is that, and again, like once is like he's pretty much the primary. He was in this series, and then he was also in the next one, which was V: The Final Battle. He was pretty much the only melanin rich character, it, you know. So it was very interesting that he went through the biggest change of any character, coming in as a criminal. When we meet him, he's breaking into a house, right? So he comes in as a criminal, and then he exits as a fighter, as a revolutionary. Um, but again, you have to look at his name. If anybody would be most closely related to the Anunnaki, based just upon name, it would be him, because his name actually says that's what he is, right? So you have this particular character. Like I said, his name was Elias, and there's a lot of different uh, breakdowns for that. But one of the things that is brought out in the actual film, and again, we're bouncing back between the idea of the Anunnaki, the idea of Prometheus, um, and this idea of kind of having these half hominid, half Anunnaki. So one of the things that happens is that one of what they start doing, and this is very similar to Operation Paperclip. If you guys don't know about Operation Paperclip, you should look it up. But one of the things that happened was that the V's started rounding up scientists, right? Very similar to what happened in Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, they started doing that early on. They actually started, because of the eugenics program, is when they started rounding up scientists. And essentially, and they weren't just rounding them up, because a lot of doctors came to prominence because of the eugenics program, because they would have them create all of these like false diagnosis for people. They had these things that they called mercy deaths, and let's say if a woman was pregnant, the doctor may do an examination and say, "Oh, your child is gonna come out um, with some form of mental dysfunction, right? And it would be more merciful to kill the child so that way it doesn't have to have a life where it struggles, and also not be a burden on the state, right? So they were doing these deaths in the hundreds of thousands, these mercy deaths, and it was the doctors that were um, performing these, bogus killings that began to rise to prominence. So I know a lot of times we look at, you know, you think about Nazi Germany. I mean, you had cutting edge science. I mean, they had video phones, back then. You know, some even say that they had anti gravity machines as well, which is highly possible. You know, but so they were rounding up scientists, right? So the V's started to round up scientists, and they were creating these false reports that the scientists were attacking them, right? And so they came out with a program where they said that all scientists, pay attention, all scientists would have to come in and register, and the V's were cooperating with the local government and military to maintain order, and that all scientists would have to come in and register, and then they would be tracked by computer. Now, this is important. 1983, right? So 1983, we have home computing, but it's not accessible to the average person, right? Um, you know, the microchip, being able to have a computer in your house. Most people still didn't even have a computer in their house to maybe 10 years after this. We're not talking maybe the early 90s, maybe. you know. So the concept of saying you're going to be tracked by a computer at that time is just as serious as saying like you're going to be inserted, like we're going to put a microchip in you. You know what I mean? Because at that time, the mystique around computers were just that big. You know what I mean? You got to realize this is a time when we weren't even using fax machines, right? Which we don't really use now, but the fax machine wasn't even a thing there then, let alone a computer. You know what I mean? Um, so that concept there of tracking, right, now introduces several things, but one of which is legislative tyranny on the basis of science, right? So one could even call that somewhat of a scientific tyranny, right? Um, so what happens, and now I'm going back to the science thing, because of course the scientists had the potential to really figure out what these things were, you know. So they were being rounded up and they were disappearing left and right all around the world. Scientists were disappearing, and of course we saw certain scenes where they were actually being killed. Um, Now I want to take you back again to the concept of Prometheus, the original architects, the Sumerian, tablets, but this concept again of creating this half hominid, half Anunnaki. So one of the things that happened, there was a youth captain by the name of Brian. He was a V, and he was commissioned by the commander at the time, the fleet commander. Her name was Diana or Diane, right? But Diana, and Diana is important. Is important. All these names are important. And she told him to basically impregnate a specific human female, like because she was a scientist herself, right? So when you look at the series, she just looks like she's some like hardcore military leader, but she was actually a scientist, right? Even though she was the leader of the fleet, she was a scientist. So you kind of get the sense that possibly it's science that or scientists that govern this society, very similar to Prometheus, where it's scientists, very similar to the Sumerian tablets, it's scientists. To a lot of things, it's scientists, right? So they first, of course, they're going to round up the scientists, but they're also doing experiments. Now we come to find out that their planet, basically there was war on their planet, and as a result they really depleted the resources and the life of their planet, and it became too difficult for them to sustain themselves on that planet, which is why they came to Earth. Um, Now, one of the interesting things you'll find is that they start putting up posters where they're showing themselves, like it's all this propaganda. Now you gotta understand, this posters is 1983, so it's not going to be blast. It's not going to be social media, So I want you to like see relatively the power of these things. Like what is a poster in 1983? Like that's social media. That's about as much advertising as a personal person can put up. Because I can have a poster and I can put it at a bus stop. I can put it on a telephone pole. I could put it on the side of a wall, right? So it's the voice of the people are these bills and these posters and stuff like that, right? So in these posters, they're saying like, "We are your friend. Friendship is universal," right? So they're essentially constantly rocking people to sleep with these ideas that they're proclaiming their friendship to humanity. But what we find over the course of time is that first they say, okay, well, we're just going to work on the shores of your planet because there's salt water. We need water on our planet, and you have an abundance of water. Then we find out that they don't really need the water. It wasn't about the water. Um, they're collecting humans, right? And they're collecting them for two reasons. One, because they're gonna train some of them to be warriors to fight their enemies. They have this enemy they call an even greater enemy. Now, if you read any of the Palladian agenda, that will bring that forth to you. But a lot of the it's not just there's more even in that. But then they also uh, are collecting humans for a food source. They find out that they also want to eat them. Okay. Now, this coincides with a lot of other myths. Now, the reptilian piece is important. Like, a lot of times you'll see that with like alien movies. Like, there's always this reptilian aspect, and of course, if you watch or listen to people like David Icke, who like in the early 2000s became um, really popular, with like his ideas about a reptilian agenda that, the majority of the people in power, the elitists around the world, actually came from an ancient reptilian bloodline, and he associated that with the Anunnaki. True, false, whatever, right? But there's a scene in V where they're speaking about this, and they're talking about, well, how could they be reptiles? And again, they drop little things you got to catch. So Julie says, Julie's the biochemist. She's like, well, it could have happened here on Earth. That was like everything you need to hear right there, right? They say stuff like that, and then they'll have like a laugh track or somebody say something stupid to distract you from what was just said. So she says that, and they're like, oh, man, Julie, get it. Shut up. No, they ain't say it. It's network TV, but, they're like, oh, no, that couldn't happen, right? Um, so she was like, no, think about it. 60 million years ago, uh, there were reptiles all over the planet, right? So she's making a reference back to obviously dinosaurs, right? And she says, there was a meteor that killed them, and essentially, uh, what was inside that meteor, or what the meteor created, was irradium, and the irradium dust went all over the planet, and many of those dinosaurs could not survive with the dust all over. The change in temperature, the change in light. What you see about V's is that they're sensitive to light. They wear sunglasses all the time, right? And they're also sensitive to heat. You know, but they're reptiles. They're cold blooded. So the idea there again of what's being shared, and I'm going to take you back to Prometheus, is that though we're seeing them come on ships from outer space, and they're saying that we're coming out of that Sirius star system. Now, one of the other things too is that Brian, when he's courting Robin, and he's looking up at the sky, like, my home is up there, whatever, And she was like, "Where's that?" And he's like, "Oh, you would call it Canis Minor, right?" Now, another important piece, right? Now we know that's, that's what we're talking about, the Sirius system, or the dog star, as we say. But Canis means dog. So you have Canis Minor and you have Canis Major, right? Um, and the thing about it is that that particular constellation, it was said that Zeus gave that dog, which was really Orion's belt, because they changed it around later, but gave that to Diana as a gift, right? That's an important piece because again, our fleet commander's name is Diana, right? So you have to kind of see some of the correlations here, and you start to realize that that's what these archaeologists were digging up in the beginning. One of the things that they found, and there's a scene where one of the archaeologists who later gets killed, he's in his office and he's like going through some paper, and he's like he came to a revelation. This was like right around when they killed him. You see these skulls. He has a bunch of skulls like on a shelf, and then when you get to the last skull, it doesn't have the nose cartilage structure and whatnot of a human as we know it, and it almost looks reptilian, you know. So there's this idea that possibly the V's were here, and we find this out later when, well, we don't find that out. This is a theory that I'm saying, but it's implied. Later when they go to fight them, they fight them with what they call the red dust, and the red dust is is something that can kill them, right? So you almost get the sense of like maybe these were some of the primitive reptilian creatures who were here before, and somehow they were taken off planet or went off planet, and they're just coming back, right? Um, Now I'm gonna read something real quick. I'm gonna read a verse because I put this in my notes. Like I said, I did notes last year. I didn't really go from them too much because I don't remember the order of them. I left a lot of them out, but um, Numbers 13, 30, and 30, right? And it says, but Caleb, because I remember thinking about this for the father, quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. He's talking about a land. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who came from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. Now, obviously, we're talking about giants, right? And this is right in Numbers 13, 30, 33. I mean, it's a bunch of references to giants, all in the scriptures. But when he said, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak. Remember, without the key, Anak, Anum, people from heaven. Key, earth, right? So, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who came from the Nephilim, right? So you have a reference right there, right? There's a bunch of them though. But again, this idea or kind of these scrolls and these tablets. Now, I want you to understand too that when you read the Sumerian tablets, one of the things that's shared is that when Adamu was created, that he and his female counterpart were kept in a place called Eden, Edin, Edin, right? That's the place that they were kept, and they gained a knowledge, and that knowledge displeased the Anunnaki, And because they gained that knowledge, they were removed from the garden, right? Um, and if you read the Gnostic account, it gets even more interesting, because then you have other children in there, you have other generations and stuff like that, of how it went down, of how the story actually happened. And there's several Gnostic accounts; it's not just one. But the point I'm saying is that in looking at V, you know, what we're looking at here is a story not only about tyranny, scientific tyranny, um, the introduction of a fascist regime right inside of America, but we're also looking at the story of DNA mixing, and we're looking at the story of possibly um, individuals who may come back or return at some point, and the relationships, the genetic relationship that we may already have with those individuals, right? So I'm speaking very vague on purpose. And the reason I'm speaking vague is because I want you to check it out for yourself. This is, like I said, I just wanted to kind of give you an introduction um, of those concepts of, like, scientists being a threat, or totalitarian suppression of truth, right? Which is something that someone had complained about um, in the actual film. Or like one of the things that Daniel's father said, he was like, I could read the newspaper or watch the news, but they both say the same thing, sometimes practically word for word. So you start to get to see the controlling of media, how it's used there in order to make sure that an agenda is pushed, right? One of the things that Julie said that I thought was really interesting, just from a racial perspective, um, when they started to discriminate, like once they kind of outlawed scientists, then it was humans as well who were like started to shy away from scientists and doctors in particular. In fact, there was one scene where there was a gardener, and he goes up to one of his clients. He was like, "I can't do your yard anymore." And she was like, "Why?" And he was like, "Because your neighbors say if I continue to do your yard, they're not gonna work for me." And her husband was a scientist, so she was like, "All right, I understand." Um, but one of the things that Julie said, like when her boyfriend was a stockbroker, and people started to treat him differently. She said, "They're always so polite, but we know, don't we? That's the biggest problem." I thought that was so interesting when you think about um, different characteristics of neo-white supremacy and racism, right? Um, it's the same type of vibe. Like, you're so polite, but I know. You're almost too polite, right? And that was another aspect that was included in here when you started to see people being uh, uh, discriminated against based on what they knew, because they were doctors or scientists. They knew something that became a problem to the overlords. So it's very similar to, again, when you look at those old Sumerian myths, and you realize, or you look at how, or read how the Anunnaki became displeased with Adumu and his female consort because of the knowledge that he gained, or they gained, in Eden. And again, I want to reiterate, much older than your biblical tales. All right. And that's not to knock biblical tales at all. It's just to show that, um, things didn't just begin with the printing press. Just because someone, printed up something in a printing press doesn't mean that was the start of it. A lot of what we seek to understand is a lot more ancient than we want to give credit for. Even when you think about the usages of gold, right? Um, why do we like gold so much? It's not that rare. Sure, it doesn't really tarnish. It doesn't rust. It's a great conductor of heat, great conductor of electricity. But why are we so gold crazy? And I mean, you can go back to Bulgaria, 4,000 years, Egypt, of course, in particular South Africa, um, And these South Africa, Mesopotamian areas are important because it was said that when the Anunnaki came and created these first hybrids, they actually came to Mesopotamia. And when they were really mining and doing their work, it was in South Africa. It's no wonder why you would have someone like Credo Mutwa come forward and tell stories of a reptilian race, and kind of linked up with David Icke and had whole narratives about that. But again, you think about this love for gold that we have, and it's a theory. Again, it's about V, but it's not about V. Um, I've always had a theory that perhaps that was genetically engineered into us. If you have a love for something, if you're hired to mine it, not hired, I mean, you're a slave race, of course, before the rebellion, right? But you are designed to mine a particular chemical or particular element inside of the earth. If I can create a genetic disposition inside of you to have a lust towards that particular element, it will not only make it easier for you to sniff it out and find it, but it will make you more enthused and motivated to actually do the work that I designed you to do. So just a theory. But again, you should watch these films and see the theories that you get. Like I said, Brian even mating with Robin, who was a virgin at the time, and saying that, yeah, I come from the Canis Major star system, and Don saying, oh, we're 4 segments away from the star you know as Sirius. You know what I mean? So that's an important thing to kind of look at when you're looking at the dog star. You're looking at Sirius, and then you connect that with the Anunnaki, and then also watch Prometheus and connect the star map there, and you'll start to see the correlations with all of them. But even when you're doing that as well, I would also urge you, and I don't mean to give all the homework assignments. I know movie breakdown is supposed to be fun, but I would also urge you to check out, like I said, Sinclair Lewis's "It Can't Happen Here," and really, because that's just, if you don't check out anything, that's an important book to read. It doesn't get as much light and shine as it probably should, but just how easy it is to establish law in America through promises, just like V did. Oh, we'll fix this. We'll give you our knowledge. We'll give you our wisdom. We'll solve your world problem. But you just got to let us take over your broadcast and your military. And then the same thing when you see what it can't happen here, and how easy and how quick that one individual was able to come into power and then establish martial law for the protection and good of everyone, quote unquote, right? So yeah, that's basically the breakdown that I wanted to share as far as V. And there's so much more, because like I said, you have V, the Final Battle, which wasn't as good as this one. They clearly had a smaller budget, and you can tell that they peace nephew, what's happening now, and you could see that they reused some of the same sets from the original V, right? So it was a little cheesier, but and it was cheesy. It had some like little corny stuff in it, but they also introduced a character, my man Michael Ironside, right? He played a character called Ham Tyler. He was a very interesting character. Anytime you see the name Ham, right? You're talking about Hamites. He always wore this black leather jacket. He always wanted to fight, like he wanted to blow stuff up. I mean, he was the other black dude, you know, played by a white dude. But when you see that name Ham, they're talking about Hamitic people, right? Um, but he was a very interesting character, and Elias was still, and again, remember Elias is Elijah, but appreciate you too, occultism. Thank you. You know what I mean? But yeah, so it was just, when you pay attention to the names of the freedom fighters and what was actually going on, and you look again at that reptilian aspect, you want to ask yourself, well, why use a reptile when you could use so many? Because you have You have reptilian aliens that often are promoted, and then you have grays, right? A grays versus the reptiles, right? So a lot of times when you're looking at the grays, which when you look at the movie Prometheus, they almost you would almost think they were grays just because of the way they looked, but they had more of the description and the characteristics of Nephilim. You know, just the size. They were big. They were like giants. You know, and again, these were the same images of people on walls. I mean, if you look at the reliefs in Abydos, if you've ever been to the continent, and in particular Kemet, or if you ever get an opportunity to go, you want to hit up Abydos. You know, I mean, there's certain places I've gone to in Kemet that kind of like when you look, you know, it's just like the story. You just you know, you just read this. Oh, you know, but Abydos is where you got most of the outer space stuff. You know, you got most of the stuff that kind of, huh? You know, like you see the pictures of the light bulbs, pictures of things flying, and not pictures you on relief walls, on walls, right? Um, but yeah, you know, so you get to see like there's been a series, there's been several times where this reference to extraterrestrials has been brought up, and you know, like I said, when you go through Prometheus, you see the architects, and you also see the beginning of that life form, you know, uh, that you see in Predator, that you see in Alien, that's just killing humanity, and like you realize, oh, that's the purifier. They built those. It's like that's like the trash compactor basically. So you release a couple of those animals out on the planet, and they just kill humanity, so we can start the experiment over again, right? Um, and one of the things that you notice with Prometheus is that there's a female who's on there who gets impregnated, and she essentially gets impregnated by the alien spore, right? And it seems that that housing and that encasement of the humanoid female um, brought a product that was most closely related to something that was not as primitive, but had the strength and everything like that, right? So you start to see that it's the mixing of the DNA that creates what they might consider to be their best product, you know, when you're looking at that, right? So with V, you got the same thing. You know, you also had a relationship between a V character by the name of William and a woman. She was a waitress, and she was like, "Oh, they call me Harm, short for Harmony. Don't ignore names, like all of that stuff. William, Will, Harmony, right? So you got to look at the correlation between the two. Even with, well, I don't want to go back to Prometheus. Like I'm giving you too much Prometheus, but so yeah, you know, you start to see that there's a relationship with that splicing and that DNA mixing. But V is like a real deep film to check out. Like I said, because not just because it gives you that concept of like, yeah, what if I was built to manufacture something? What if that is what it is? Like the architects Prometheus. Is that why we like gold so much? You know, we were designed to, you know, do that, or you know, there's so many different things that you could reflect on. Like I said, you know, when you're doing breakdowns, or you know, when you drop in, or you're looking for science, you want to try to find the relevancy. You know what I mean? It's very easy to look at anything and say, are they doing this, are they doing that, right? That's super easy. Anybody could do that. But, you know, can I apply it to a political structure? Can I apply it to an economic structure, right? So that was one of the geniuses of, like I said, of the series, because he didn't begin with saying, I'm going to do Star Wars. He began by saying, I'm going to do a film about America being taken over by a dictatorship. And they were like, well, you better make it Star Wars. So, you know, having the two mixed in, and then him saying, all right, well, I'm going to do the Anunnaki thing. Well, of course, he didn't, you know, but when you really watch it, you see like there's no place you can go. It's almost like when you do certain films, you're always going to have the Osarian myth. There's no place else to go. There's going to be a protagonist, there's going to be an antagonist. Most likely the protagonist is going to become an unlikely hero. They're going to go through a journey, and at the end of the journey, they're going to be better than where they started, right? So that's the story of Haru. You know, that's the story of the Lion King. A story all of them. A story of V. They're all the same thing. You know, I'm gonna be sitting somewhere. Everything is peaceful. Everything that's Conan. Everything is good. Everything is peaceful. Raiders come. They kill everybody. Most importantly, they kill my father. They kill my father. Might even kill my mother. Then I have to go on a journey. Now that journey makes me end up having to go through essentially um, my chakras. That's essentially what's happening. I'm going through all my chakras. There was a movie, I think it was Riddick, or the Chronicles of Riddick, that came out some years ago with Vin Diesel. Same type of thing, right? Conan too, though, but he went through all these different processes. But with Riddick, it was so cool because you could see the colors. There was another good movie that came out years back called Sucker Punch, and it seems like a stupid movie. It's not. It seems like it's silly. It's a deep movie. Um, Even when you first watch it, you're gonna be like, "This is silly." Like it seems like I don't want to say a chick flick, but it's deep. Um, but when you look at the elements in each scene, like using wood, more wood here, more metal here, this color, you realize, oh, they're going through the chakras. And then when they get to the end, they're outside and they're looking at, it's like it's cold, right? So when you see that snow, you know, okay, I'm at the crown chakra, right? So a lot of times in movies, especially when you have like movies with like Vikings, barbarians, things like that, at the end, when there's, you know, when they finally end their journey, you're gonna find them in the snow, right? Or sitting on a throne somewhere, which is what you saw with the Chronicles of Riddick. Like he's sitting on a throne, which means now I'm at the crown chakra now, you know. So a lot of flicks that you watch are gonna take you through that exact journey, you know, which is again it's the Haru journey. I gotta go down. I was at the crown, but I didn't deserve to be there, right? Because that was heaven. Something happened. There was an invasion in heaven. And I either got kicked out of heaven, like I got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, or I fell. Now I got to fight my way back up. But on my journey of fighting my way through the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, the blue, the indigo, the violet, you know, or through the root, you know, through the things that, through my basic survival, learning how to protect my personage, and then getting to a point where I can appreciate something about life outside of the war, you know, getting to that place where I now find my personal voice, my personal power, strength, identity, and then I get to another level where I have to decide if I'm going to make a decision between um, maybe killing or healing. That's your heart chakra. That's in the green. And then I get to another place where I say, okay, now I'm finding my abstractness and my creativity. You saw that with Conan, like when he came back, you know, his whole everything with him was samurai. I'm gonna kill, I'm gonna kill, I'm gonna kill, I'm gonna kill. And then when they go back into when he gets banged up, and they go back into the temple to fight Thulsa Doom, who was also a reptilian, if you remember. Thulsa Doom was a reptilian. He comes back as a thief this time, right? And that thief energy represents creativity. And that's actually your throat chakra. A lot of people think your throat chakra is just talking, you know, like speaking out loud and stuff like that. But the throat chakra is actually your abstract thought, your abstract thinking. You know, it's speaking too, but it's your ability to function in the abstract. So essentially, yeah, he comes back. Now he's functioning from the throat. You know what I mean? And he's not just saying kram, kram, you know, every 5 seconds. And then after that, you go to a situation where you're like you're thinking about others. You're not just thinking about your own survival. You're thinking about the survival of others, right? That's the brow chakra, and you got to realize that if you ever forget, like easy way to remember is that they all coincide with each other, right? So if I know what the sacral chakra is, I'll know what the brow chakra is because those are the 2 points that coincide. The root coincides with the crown, so they do the complement opposite of each other, essentially, right? So when I get to the crown, now I'm ruling all. I'm looking out for all. I'm Obatala. I'm Orishanla. But when I'm in the root, I'm looking out for myself. You know, I'm in the root chakra. I'm in the red. It's all about me. I need to get this. I need to get that. I need to get that. But when I go through my process now, you know, it's almost like Lion King, right? Simba was like, man, I'm sitting here, I'm eating worms and grubs. I'm good, man. I'm all right. But then when he goes back up to the crown, like he's like, nah, now I'm looking after my pride. You see what I'm saying? So um, that's something to just kind of think about. You know, all films pretty much have to take you to the same place. You know, at the end of the day, they take you to the same place, and you know whether you're getting information about the Nephilim and Enki and Enlil and um, places like Larsa. This is all in the Sumerian tales, which maybe we'll get into at some point. But you know, like I said, Enki establishes his headquarters in South Africa, right? So that's why the digging in the very beginning was so very interesting. You know, they were really setting the scene. You seeing the skulls and stuff like this, and then like this is the oldest. Of course, we're here. This is where the oldest bones have been found. You know, um, so it's taking you back to the beginning in concept in that sense. But yeah, so like I said, V's a cool flick. Check out. You know, 1983. There was something happening other than Tron and ET and Star Wars and Conan and the Never Ending Story and stuff like that. This was actually just on TV, and you know, very creative, very inventive. All right, so I'm gonna sign on out, and you know, thank you all for checking out. I know I don't have the jovial humor of a brother Low. I know he keeps y'all in stitches, but you know, you'll get him back. He'll be back next strong. He's going to be breaking down roots, and he's breaking down something after roots. All right, I can't remember, but I know he's doing roots. Yeah, so you definitely want to check that out. You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome, Sister Precious. Um, and again, for those asking about our new sign up, March 20th, right? And there's a fast that we do as well. You're welcome, Sister Manera, as a collective. So definitely tune into like the social media accounts because, you know, every season, whether it's the solstice or the equinox, we always do a fast leaning into it. You know, different levels. Sometimes it's dry fast, sometimes liquid fast. You know, sometimes you know what you can handle. You know, for some it might be like I ain't gonna smoke no cigarettes. You know, for 10 days, or you know I'm not gonna smoke any anything else for 10 days. Um, you know, and willfully you build up to a dry fast. You know, where you take nothing, no water, no nothing. You know what I mean? You just find something else to do. Go for a walk. You know. So these are all different things you could do, but you know, you're always welcome to join us in that, and just know that solidarity is there. You know, you're not on your own, but you know, you should tune into the social media channels. Anu Life GM. Usually they do postings about it like that. You know, as far as like when the fasts and stuff come up. You know what I mean? Coming up to the solstices and the equinox, and of course we know we're getting ready to come up to the vernal equinox. All right. And at the vernal equinox, we'll be also opening for applications up through to the end of March. So March 20th to March 31st. All right. And like I said, that will be the last open enrollment that we'll do. And then after that, it will be strictly recruited. You know, you can inquire about membership, but it will be more of a recruitment process after that, as opposed to large cohorts and you know open enrollment applications, things like that. So if you're thinking about it, you probably want to do it. And if you feel like it's not time for you, please don't do it. Save us the work. All right. So this is Chief Yuya, and this has been what's he called? Movie understandings, but I just call it a movie decode of V, the original series, 1983. All right. So everyone, enjoy your evening. Be well, and you're more than welcome, Bonita Negra, and you're welcome, Manira, I saw a thank you in there, as well as Mama Sequoia, and I was about to say Mama Sa, Makusa, and you know, Precious and everybody else. Thank you for tuning in or whatever. You know what I mean? And you know, after you watch the flick, feel free to put a comment underneath, like what you think, like what you saw. It was a lot, like I didn't want to say, because I, you know, I want you to check it out, but check it out and then, you know, see what you see. All right. I would love to hear your comments and your perspective on different things. All right. Chief Yuya signing out. Peace, peace, peace.